And so this has been another, unfortunately, classic year of the impact of climate change, where high up in the Rocky Mountains and the headwaters of the Colorado River, you have slightly below average or average snowpack, which seems good and on paper good. But for a variety of reasons, that's not translating to an average runoff for the Colorado River. And so you take what what you just cited, which is just below average snowpack. But if you look at the stream flow forecast for Lake Powell, which is where all the upper Colorado River Basin all funnels into Lake Powell, that forecast sits at just 67% of average. So close to average snowpack, two-thirds of average runoff forecast. And that's the challenge we're seeing with climate change and drought and some of the issues facing the Colorado River.
Okay, we're downstream. We are the lower basin, and there's currently a little bit of tension between the upper and lower basins. Uh, Policy is probably good or bad depending on where you live right now. But in one respect, some of the leaders down here went back to the Trump administration and asked them to kind of reset what the Bureau of Reclamation left with under the Biden administration. Do you have any reaction to what happened there?
So it is a very tense negotiating process between the upper and lower basin states for sure. They have their disagreements and but what I would say is, regardless of administration and regardless of what's happening at the federal level, the basin states need to reach an agreement, and they need to reach it as soon as possible. These guidelines actually expire, and so unless you have a new agreement, you revert to a very old way of managing the river, which is not going to be good for anyone. And so the number one priority is that the basin states actually reach an agreement. They have an alternative that the seven states can agree on, and then reclamation, the federal government can move forward with including that in the whole NEPA process for coming up with the new guidelines. So unfortunately, politics gets involved, and each upper and lower basin states have their negotiating positions, but we all here in the West rely on this river. You're downstream, we're upstream. We all rely on this river, and so not having an agreement is a big challenge, and really potentially harms the river and the people who rely on it. So that's what I say is we need the states to come together. We need them to agree, need them to find compromise, find ways to reach an agreement where we can all move forward with a healthy flow in Colorado River.
And now we have this snowpack level looming over that conversation. How do you think that this year's numbers will affect that going forward?
I think it just highlights the sense of urgency. It highlights the sense of importance for new guidelines. April is usually when we have good understanding what the snowpack is going to look like for that given year and what that looks like for runoff. But there's also lots of things that can happen in April and in May that impact what we see in terms of water supply and runoff in our rivers. And so you can have your April snowpack, and then the region can warm up quite dramatically and see very little precipitation, which is what we've seen in the last week or so. And your snowpack starts to melt off pretty quickly, and that snowpack starts to come down pretty quickly. Conversely, there are years where you get a really wet May, and you can actually see some recovery in your snowpack. And it all matters because we're talking about the peak snowpack here in the spring, April, May-ish. And the snowpack acts as a reservoir for water supply in the West. Importantly, it matters because come late summer, you see a lot of Western rivers getting fairly low and getting pretty dry and pretty hot, and the temperatures warm up. So it impacts water supply, impacts water users, and it impacts the river itself in terms of river health and endangered species. Water is so integral to life in the West. It's a part of it's a part of our entire society here in the West. So it's integrated into politics, into food, into recreation, into cities, into manufacturing. It's so integrated into our way of life here in the West. And then you throw in the politics, both local, state, and national. and international with Mexico. It's just a fascinating topic to study and to follow along with, and it can be very frustrating at times. But if you look at kind of the history of the Colorado River Basin, it's we've always found a solution to get us to the next step, and these I hope we can find a solution for these new set of guidelines that will help us respond to what we're seeing, which is a changing climate, increasing temperatures, and overall decrease in water availability.
There's a lot of talk among water managers in the lower basin and probably up there too, that the wrong place for this all to be decided is in the courts.
I will say that there is um, almost universal agreement that should be the last resort by all means. And um, if the states can't reach an agreement and this thing ends up in the Supreme Court, you're looking at maybe a decade or longer for the Supreme Court to make a decision. And who knows? The only thing we know from that decision is there will be winners and losers, and we don't know who the winners and losers would be. So it's a huge risk to the states. It's a risk to water users. It's incredibly expensive, incredibly time intensive process to potentially not know where you're going to end up. And so I think um, no one wants to see this thing end up in the courts for a variety of reasons. And the basin will be better off, the river will be better off if the states and the feds can find an agreement and move forward with the basin states framework that most, if not all, stakeholders and sovereigns can agree on in the basin. One of the cool things about rivers is it's all connected and it's one big watershed. And so no matter where you sit in the basin, it matters what happens across the basin. And so that would be my number one priority, regardless of where I am in the basin, is that the states are actually finding a way to move forward with new guidelines that provide me certainty and provide us with resiliency when it comes to climate change.